Hello and welcome to PerchPeek Pods, the only global mobility podcast to get best-in-class interviews with global mobility and HR leaders. And wow, am I excited for the guest today. Tanya, introduce yourself to the community. Tell us, how did you get into the wonderful world of mobility and what are you up to right now?
So Paul, thank you so much for hosting me. So excited always to be here and share a little bit about my passion around global mobility. So for those of you who know me, I've been doing global mobility for almost 20 years now, which is unbelievable, but I've had so many exciting opportunities and I've gotten to go on assignment and move myself. So I've also lived the experience. And I loved, a few people have heard my story, but I love telling people how I got into global mobility. So truth be told, so I went to college, I got a business degree. And
Nice.
Back in the day, there weren't actually, like HR degrees weren't a thing. So I knew I wanted to work in a business, but I also knew I really wanted to help people. So I knew I wanted to go into HR. So my very first HR job, I was in recruiting because that's where you start in HR is as a recruiter. And the recruiting team worked really closely with the relocation team. And I'm going to be honest with you, I had no idea what they did, but I was 24. It was a group of women. They were all having so much fun.
Wow.
That when they had an opening on their team, I immediately applied for the job. I mean, I have zero experience. I have no idea what.
And where was this? Where was this, Tanya?
So this was at Albertsons. So for those who know, it's a U.S. grocery chain. It's one of the larger grocery chains, and it was at their corporate office. So,
wow.
And again, started in recruiting there, and then had no idea what relocation was, which many of us who started the industry.
Exactly.
So, and I didn't even go into it for the right reasons. I was just like, I'm young. This is like a fun, cool group. And I want to be part of this group. And that's how I started my reload journey. And at that time, it was just a U.S. domestic program. And then, of course, from there, I went on to work at other companies and have other experiences in global and immigration and tax, et cetera. But that was my first step into the global mobility world.
That's so cool. And we always get feedback from people who are like, and you're so passionate about mobility and people don't typically plan to go into it. What would I know you're super passionate about mobility. What would you say to someone who is like, I don't know anything about mobility, but if you had to summarize why it's a great place to have a career, what would you say the top 2 or 3 things are?
Yeah. So for me, again, I really wanted to be in a role where I really felt like I was making an impact, making a difference, helping people. But I didn't necessarily want to be at a nonprofit. Like I wanted to work at a business. And I would say the thing for me that is the most inspiring and motivating is I really, truly, the work that we do impacts people's personal lives, whether it's helping them move up in their career, whether it's helping them with their visa, with their green card. Like you get to know people, you get to know about their families, and you actually see the impact that you're making. And so that is the number one thing for me. And that's what, when I got into mobility and relocation and I actually understood what it was, like, that's what keeps me here is because I just know everything we do, even simple things like, updating our policies to make sure they meet the employees' needs, like that has such a personal impact in people's lives. And I just, that makes a difference for me.
And I think it can be a little bit easy sometimes when you're breathing it every day to sort of forget that, like, wow, it's so cool, the impact that is such a big deal in people's lives, and getting to hopefully positively more often than not impact that is such a if you're going to spend your time doing anything, it's a great thing to do. Let's fast forward then. So you sort of fell into it, which is quite classic. Then you've worked at so many impressive places, real mixed bag, Micron, Nike, Twilio. One of the reasons I was so excited to have you on is because it's been such a mixed bag. I assume some like traditional programs in there that maybe are traditional, shall we say, through to Twilio, remote first company, like pure play classic tech company with, I'm sure, very, very different setups, shall we say, from where you started your career. Tell us about the way you've seen mobility change, and in particular some of like the main differences at Twilio versus some of the more traditional programs you sort of grew up in.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. I think there's 2 things. One is like different industry segments, and then also kind of like different periods of time, right? And global mobility has obviously evolved as so many things have. So when you think about different companies, so the terminology I had heard for Twilio was born global.
Oh.
What I mean by that is that Twilio, no, it was such a young company. There wasn't the way that they think about mobility in the workforce is different from a lot of the other companies you mentioned that I work for who have been around 30, 50, like a number of years that started out maybe more as a US only company, right? Yeah. And then became multinational. People remember MNCs with like terminology we don't use as much anymore, right? But I would say the difference is Twilio's just like they've just always been global in a lot of younger tech companies. So the way that they view the workforce and like location strategy, it's hard to explain, but it's just very different because of where they started and the place they came from. So I would say that partially influences what the policies are and the strategy around the workforce, right, is just different. But then I would also say, okay, so I worked at very different industries. So I worked at Micron for a number of years, manufacturing, right? Then I went to Nike. Nike also manufacturing, but a lot of retail as well. And also, I think, really trying to get into the tech space. Then I worked at Expedia, travel, but really a tech company. Yeah. I mean, at the heart of it, but also, sneaky tech, but also a travel company. So again, different industry. And then Twilio is really a software, like we're really a tech company. Yeah. And so I say that because the types of people you hire, the skill sets you need are different. And also like when you're talking about manufacturing, like you physically, like, as you mentioned, Twilio is fully remote. I mean, you have a few hub offices and we can do that because of the work, our product. Yeah. But if you're a manufacturing company, like you actually need people in the office, right? And so I just say that because I think that also influences the strategy that you have around reload, but also the types of program and benefits you need to offer. And so I will say, if I think back to more Nike and Micron, at least when I was there, a very, very traditional program, big expat program, a lot of domestic moves, a very, I would say in my mind, like a very competitive program. I'd also share, because I just think it's so great and interesting, but as companies think about their policies and programs, they also really like to align them with kind of their company value. Yeah. And one of the things about Nike, which I always impressed me, is Nike is a premium brand and we offered premium reload benefits. And it was one of the most generous and very, I guess, like all-encompassing, and I'm trying to think the right word for it, packages that we offered. But it was like, we're Nike and like we have a premium product. We want our employees to have a premium experience. And I would say it wasn't just for mobility, it was for other parts. And not to say that we don't give everybody at Twilio a great experience too, right? But our employees their expectations are different. We have a very young workforce, right? And they're looking for different things. So, we have a competitive offering within our space and I think our employees are very happy. But just to your question, like it is different at different companies. They view it, but also it's not just the company, it's the industry.
So many nuggets, Tanya, so many threads to pull on. I think what I'm hearing there is sort of era you grew up in makes a big difference. And as you say, it's not growing up necessarily at Twilio from being a US company and then sending people to start the MNC and then on assignment starting that has a huge impact. Industry generally, has a huge impact, and then also brand. I really want to pick on the that last one first, which is the aligning your policy with the company culture and how that can allow you to get things done. Because I think that's something we hear, and I know you're particularly good at, is like actually instigating change. And I know that's something that is commonly tough for mobility leaders to like actually get buy-in for their programs. It sounds like at Nike you had a lot of success by almost aligning some of the global mobility to overall company and business goals and also business brand. Tell us a bit more about what that looked like in practice. Was that, are you just weaving that into pitch decks when making the case for policies, or like what does that actually mean in terms of tangible things that were done to represent that?
Yeah. And I would say, I think this is true at all companies, and the way you navigate is maybe a little bit differently, but So definitely in pitch decks and the way you talk about it and the way you put all your materials together. But I think the big thing, from my perspective, the way to be successful is that first you really have to listen to all of your stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
And so you actually have to build relationships with them. You have to understand what are their actual business goals. And by doing that, it also gives you an opportunity to educate them about like, what does your function actually do? And how are you available to support them? Because I know, sometimes, and we talked about this, like you've got decentralized programs or you've got stakeholders in certain regions who are like, that's great that you have a mobility program, but like, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
What you have doesn't make sense. And so the only way to overcome that, I think, is to really, bring value, be a true partner to your customers, listen to what they actually need, build those relationships, have ongoing open lines of communication, because then to your more tactical, then like, yeah, I can put it in a pitch deck, but I can't put it in a pitch deck if I don't actually even know what it is you need. And if I haven't actually, either we already have it and I've been able to connect the dots, or I've changed something in the program that's going to meet the need that you have. And at different companies, whether it's changing an existing program or supplier, or it's just enhancing or tweaking it, or again, it's just saying like, actually, we already do that, but in a very nice way, but you just didn't know. So to me, those are the big things. And anybody, like, you can use that playbook anywhere, right? Like, listen, build relationship, partner, repeat back, share back, make the connections, but then it's not a one and done, right? Like it has to be this ongoing dialogue with all of your key stakeholders.
Yeah, 100%. I was going to say, like, but I think that's probably a large reason why you've been so successful at transitioning across different industries, because that playbook essentially always works, right? Listening, getting buy-in, aligning to company structure. And I think that's something that actually sometimes mobility leaders can not back themselves on, and they say, oh, I've had to this industry, etc. Should I go for this job in a different industry? You actually have so many transferable skills just from doing the job well that are going to play out well, even if it is a slightly different different industry. Tell me about that actual stakeholder buy-in though. Twilio is a remote company. As you say, it started global. That's got to be tough to try and like build and roll out your policy across a remote company around the world. How did you go about breaking down that challenge, and what were some of the successes and what have some of the challenges been for you?
Yeah, so I think the one thing to build the foundation for building a relationship is to say what you're going to do and then actually do it. And I think then you have credibility, right? And I'm also big on integrity. So I would say like, how do you establish relationships in a remote world? You've got to be able to deliver. Like I have this conversation with you, Paul. We chat about something. I follow up with you. I tell you I'm going to do something. I do it when I say I'm going to do it. You count on me, right? And then the other part of it, right, is like, again, in a virtual world, making sure that there's some kind of regular cadence for touch points, and not like, I'm not a big fan of meetings for just the sake of meetings, but it doesn't have to be a meeting. It could be a Slack. It could be an email. It could be, but just making sure there's some regular dialogue and communication happening. And it's not just like, you only hear from me when I need you. And when I don't need you, I don't exist, you don't exist. So again, it's back to that whole partnership. And I would say, it is, it can be more challenging remote, and some of that may just depend on personality. I am thankful. So one of the things about Twilio being remote first is, as we have moved away from having offices, we have reinvested that money in travel. And so I actually have had the opportunity to meet a lot of my stakeholders face to face, and actually hanging out with them. And we've done some team building event. Like I will say that, and I realize not everyone has that opportunity, but I will say that because we are remote and they recognize that there is this need to have connection and community, they have created these opportunities for us. And so I think that also helps. So, and so maybe some too is just reading in some of the personal as well as the business piece of it, and getting to know the people you work with.
Yeah, well, and I think, as you say, a lot of people know you in the industry. I think one of the things you do amazingly well is both represent the industry, but also do travel to events, show up, meet people, and it makes such a difference, doesn't it? Because it's, we're a remote company at PerchPeek, but actually, if you can get some face time, it takes that relationship from like professional to personal, and then you can leverage that, build trust, build credibility even a little bit more easily.
Well, the one thing the one thing I'd always say, and I tell people this all the time, is that, and I think this is true for every industry, but definitely for global mobility, people are very willing to help. And so if you have a question, if you're stuck on something, if you've been challenged with something and you just like, I don't even know how I'm going to do this, ask your network. Like I would say, like during COVID, when things were crazy, oh my gosh, my network, like I reached out to people. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, they're thinking about doing this, or like, what are you doing? Or we're going to do this. Is anyone doing this too? And it was, I can't even tell you how like powerful and how helpful that was. And even sometimes just to know, like, nobody has any idea what we're doing and we're all figuring it out together. So I just would say that, like,
I love that
point. Like, I've really tried to work on building my network, but I would encourage people, it just starts with asking. And you can always ask me, but like, I ask my network all the
Be
time.
careful.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love sharing stuff, but I ask my network for things all the time. And I would say that, you can't know everything, but collectively, the power of the group is like larger than the individual. And so I crowdsource a lot of information. And so I'm smarter. I like to think I'm smarter because of it, but that's the other thing that I encourage folks to do is just ask.
I love that. I love that so much. And as you say, we have a lot of leaders in the community that are part of small teams, even at sort of big companies. It's not typically a giant global mobility team, right? And so you don't often have this big group of like internal knowledge necessarily. There's a lot of education and relocation, and people are so friendly in this community, which I love. And so that there's such a nugget to say. Just ask there. I want to go back to the what you mentioned about just delivering, and like early on, like say you're going to do something and getting it done. I think something that mobility folk in general sometimes get challenged on is like, what are the high impact ROI driving activities that, what are the quick wins that you've seen make your stakeholders go, well, wow, like Tanya's moving the needle for us here. What are like some of the key things that, when you're taking on a new role, you're like, oh, I want to deliver this and this, because I know people are going to like that when you start somewhere new.
Yeah. So this is so interesting, because I'm going to say it. I can't say like it's the same thing for every company. And I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, and that is, first you have to go out and talk to your customers and listen to what they want. That. And a lot of times there's like some really quick wins. And then you mentioned ROI. Sometimes there's some stuff that doesn't have a lot of ROI, but if you do it, your customers are going to like love you forever. Anyway,
give us an example.
Is ROI. Let me see if I can think of a good example.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. Because it's always helpful to have some more specifics on some things. Oh, I can give one, easy one. And I've done this at a couple of places. And so I'm a big believer in transparency. And so where allowed, I always just like publish the policies. And I can't tell you, I've gone places and I'm like, you have all the policies documented, you have processes documented, and people are like looking for information. And I was like, well, we'll just publish it. It's a really easy, if you haven't done it, think about it. It's a really easy thing to do, but then people can find the information that they're looking for. It doesn't feel like, I don't know, like global mobility is trying to hide behind some secret veil and we don't share stuff. And so a lot of it, like it's like easy, like we've got content that we can just make available on the intranet right now. Or we can just tune it up a little bit. Like maybe it's not ready for prime time, but it can be. Right. And so that is I've seen that at other companies. That's a quick win. Like you just make information available that people are like, they can't find it, or they're confused about it, or that even simple things like, a little blurb about what is global mobility and who is the team and what do you do and who to contact and things like that, that sometimes you think everybody knows, but it's not really there. So that's one idea of something. But again, I'm big on transparency. So anytime we can, and I'm big on self-help too, although not everybody reads everything, but at least I've given them the opportunity that if they wanted to be able to find the information themselves, that they can.
Exactly. And to some extent, you're raising the awareness of global mobility so that they know where to find you, which is always a big challenge for folks, right? Is they're like, they went outside of policy and, well, they don't exist. Plus, it creates accountability for you, right, to make sure policy looks good, is fair, is clear. Ultimately, it doesn't cost very much other than a little bit of catching up, as you say. So that's on the sort of quick win side of things. One of the other reasons I was very, very excited to chat to you is because you're always looking to push the boundaries, improve things, adopt new technologies, adopt new innovation, etc. So I know that Twilio in general is making amazing strides in the world of AI. I know you've spoken a lot in the past about how excited you are about AI within global mobility, but so far, I'd say a lot of the progress has been quite fluffy. People are using it personally to speed things up or whatever. I'm not hearing many leaders tangibly using it to solve real world problems for them. What's your experience been so far, and what are you excited for in 2024 on that front?
Yeah, and maybe I'll just talk technology a little bit broader. So I love tech. I love to make sure that we are leveraging humans to do work that requires humans, and that things that can be automated or are very don't require a lot of thinking.
Yeah.
Let's drive efficiency where we can. So from a longer term view, I always do this. I like to create my own roadmap about I identify where there are opportunities and then try to map out different things. So I would say, in addition to AI, which I will talk about, I think it's important too to think about what are some of those other tech enhancements, because there are still other technology. AI is not going to do everything. It just can enhance some of the other things that you have. So for anybody who's listening, don't just be oh, it's only AI. There's other APIs, there's other things that you can do. Then we have RPA, robotic process automation. There are other things that we also have as part of some of our processes. So what I'm excited about.
Well, before we go into AI then, tell us about some area of tech that you've been wow, this has actually made a meaningful difference for our productivity or for our cost base or for our revenue, whatever it is. And tell us about an area where you've used RPA or automation generally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, so we have, I'll tell you about a couple. So,
choices, I like it.
This one's easier because I've done a lot on the tech space. But one thing that I would encourage folks to do is, so we do have APIs set up with a lot of our supplier partners.
Yeah.
We have two-way APIs, which are great because we are able to send real-time data to them, and they are able to send real-time data back to us. And the specific I will give, although we have it with multiple suppliers, is in the immigration space. And it's really been nice to be able to manage folks' work authorization and to have all of our information in sync. It also super helps with reporting for folks that are out there. One of the cool things that we've done, and we worked with our data analytics team that we launched this last year, is that we have, when we hire, mostly for new hires, but when we hire new hires who require work authorization sponsorship, we have to track that, and we have to track when they get their visa, because we have to let recruiters and all of the other onboarding teams know that, yes, Paul has his visa, he can start on X date. That used to be all manual. It used to be emails back and forth with us, with TA, with our immigration partner, et cetera. We built a dashboard. We use Tableau. So we built a dashboard. It's specifically anybody, I would say it's people team facing. It was specifically created for our recruiters, but people ops and some of the other teams who help with onboarding have access.
Yeah.
And it has real-time data about all future hires who require sponsorship and what the status of their sponsorship is. And then in the U.S., if you're familiar with U.S. immigration, sometimes we get RFEs, which are requests for evidence, and there are delays, et cetera. It tracks all that information, and there is no human intervention.
That's amazing.
You set up a data that goes into a data warehouse, and it gets parsed with other data, and it displays. And the cool thing about it having display on our internal Tableau dashboard is that the way that the data analytics team is built, that is, there are different ways also to slice it and dice it by business function, and it rolls up to different business leaders. I mean, TA can sort it by themselves and other things, but it already has some overlay of people data in it. And so all of that, again, when you talk about automation,
that's such a good example, and you're making people so jealous. I'm sure a lot of people are like, oh, I'd love to have that, because that's exactly the type of thing that just weighs people down and stops them getting strategic work done, because you're just mired in emails. What was it like getting everyone to align on that? You've got to get your vendors, you've got to get your data analytics team. You've got to get sign off for time and budget somewhere along the lines to make this happen. Were you quarterbacking that project, and how did you make that magic happen?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll say that we have a super supportive immigration partner, and so they are always. Sometimes I think companies like to work with tech companies because, I don't want to say we push the boundary, but I was like, we could do this, and what about this? I'm like, cool, we would love to build this with you and see what this looks like. So, from a partner perspective, most of our partners are always excited to see, how they can help us. So they were really great. And then from the data analytics team perspective, and a few folks in the industry have heard me say this, I'm very fortunate because my SVP, the data analytics team reports into him. And so I have been for a long time talking about there are all these opportunities around automation and efficiency, et cetera. And so I think as part of that, our team gets allocated we get a little resource, right, from some of either the HR tech team or a data analytics team to help move some of these initiatives forward. And so I would say, I just say that because I'm fortunate and I realize what a challenge it can be to make the business case. But I would still encourage everybody, again, that we did document, how many hours do we anticipate that it takes? How much time would this save? What is our new hire? We did put some data together to support it, but it also was a little bit easier. I recognize it was easier for me to get the resources. Yeah. But then also, I would say our data analytics team, they actually had fun. You'll appreciate this. They had fun building it for us. Yeah. They even offered, they're like, Tanya, when do you guys have another project for us? Yeah. It was very interesting, and it was a different, if you, again, appreciate this, a different data set that they're used to working with. Because they do a lot of turnover and retent, they do all of these other metrics. And it was this was something cool and new, and they had to bring on a new provider. And so from their perspective, it was a cool opportunity too. Exactly.
And I would say that is something that people can be nervous about going to their data analytics or internal tech team, but and often actually, think that they're not going to be interested or whatever. But actually, we find the opposite. People are so interested to work on it because it is different vendors, different data sets, interesting problems for them to solve rather than doing more of the same. And you can leverage that when trying to get buy-in for their time. Let's go back to AI then. AI. So you've already automated as much as possible in your program, Tanya. You're laying out the playbook. Let's look forward to 2024 then. Where are you thinking, or where are you most excited about potentially using AI? Do you have any good tangible examples for us?
Yeah, I'll give a specific, but I also want to share. So as a people team, we have OKRs, which are our formative goals. And one of the overarching ones is actually explore AI across the people team. So I just say that too. So it is a initiative at the very highest level. And then each of the teams are kind of looking at what that looks like for them. So one of the things that is not fully automated, but I appreciate that because we've been trying to, but we have what we call international entity transfer. So it's basically an international transfer intake form. And that it is a multi-step process, as you can imagine, because there's a business case, there's costs, there's new salary, there's immigration, there's all these things that we do. And so I actually had a meeting just a few weeks ago with our HR tech team, and we were talking about, I think it's going to start in Q2, but so stay tuned, and maybe I can give you an update afterwards. Talking about the process and different opportunities and systems. And they literally said to me, we think this could be a really good business case to try out using some AI for some of the different steps in the process, which we've already mapped. And I was like, yes, sign us up.
Yeah.
We would love to see what that actually looks like. But our people team strategy and our HR tech team is looking at AI in different places where we can best leverage it, but also working with some of our tech supplier partners to see how are they planning to use AI, and then how do we, instead of building our own in a nice way, but we Workday, we use ServiceNow, how are they going to enhance their tools that we already use today, and then how can we take advantage of that based on the way that we operate? So so I'm very excited because it is something I'd love to see. Because to your point, a lot of people are talking about AI, but not actually the how, where does it show up in the process? So
exactly. I think this is I've written about this before. I think this is the year where you'll start to see sort of the most forward-thinking programs, vendors, etc., really sort of try to solve real-life problems with it rather than just doing cool demos, sort of being actually, this has enabled us to do X, Y, Z much, much more efficiently, which is exciting. And you're definitely one of the first people to have like a tangible example to get into. And I did want to go back to the comment you actually made at the start, the automation piece around technology, really, particularly in the global mobility space, not replacing humans, allowing humans to do the more strategic work. And I think there's some nervousness, and I don't know if you found this, but sometimes people can be like, global mobility, we're moving people, etc. And it's like, actually, I feel like our industry is super well placed from that point of view, because it is so emotive that the human touch is like so critical. But how great to have some time back in your day to be more strategic or focus on being more of a talent partner to the team.
Well said. And I would say exactly that, like on the talent partner, because sometimes you get so caught up in the day-to-day work that you don't have the time to understand what is the business strategy, what is the talent strategy, what is our location strategy, how do we best support it, because you're so busy delivering on some of the day-to-day because it's so manual. So I do think it fundamentally starts to change our jobs, but I'm excited about how it's going to change our jobs.
Yeah. I mean, when you sort of think, you look at your job when you started through to now, for completely different programs, completely different use cases, change has been, change is the only constant really. So it is exciting to see how that pans out this year. We're rapidly blitzing our allotted time, Tanya, and I know you're super busy. We have a really fun tradition on the pod of the previous guest leaving a question for the next guest. The question we have today for you, Tanya, is fortunately one that I know is close to your heart. So we timed this very, very well, which is how would you recommend making the field of global mobility more sustainable? Very different to what we've discussed today, but I know, again, it's an area you're interested in. What are your top 2-3 things that you are excited about in or have seen successfully to make mobility more sustainable?
Yeah, so I love this. So thank you for our guests for asking the question. So that I can share a little bit about this. So the first thing I would tell everyone to do is, if you're not familiar, you should educate yourself with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. They've got a website. They've got all kinds of great information. If you're like, I don't even know where to start, and there's just an abundance of resources. There's some things, as folks know, that I'm really passionate for a nonprofit called Move for Hunger. One of the goals is around ending food insecurity. So there's just a lot of things that are wrapped up into that. So, but tangible things you can do. So this is what I have done. We have a director of sustainability. I reached out to her and I said, hey, by the way, we move people, and moving people inherently, like, we move stuff and they fly. And, there are different ways that we are, being impactful. And I want to understand, how do we also ensure that that is captured in, we came up with a science-based goal as a company around sustainability. And so it was a really great dialogue. They were so, again, if you don't ask and reach out, no one knows, but they were so excited I reached out. They had no idea what global mobility did. And
surprise.
Yeah, but it was great. And they did include our data, and they did, I did work with our supplier partners to get some information, more specific information for them. And that was part of some of the calculations, assessments that they did, which was really cool. So I would say, like, if you have someone internally within your company, like, reach out to them, tell them what you do, see if there's an opportunity. The other thing that we did as well is that, as we've gone through some supplier RFPs, to request for proposals, we have actually made it one of our questions about what they're doing as a company. And we've asked them to co-commit with us to reach certain goals. And we've asked for regular reporting, and that was contractual. So I would say, as you have an opportunity, right? And you don't have to be in an RFP. I mean, we did it as part of an RFP, but you could just reach out to suppliers now and understand a little bit more from them. Some of them, you might be surprised, are doing a lot, but you didn't ask, so they just didn't share it with you. So ask them. Maybe you can set up, we've got some quarterly reporting around some different things that are important to us. And because we're still setting some of the goals, et cetera, like, we haven't given our suppliers, like, you must do X by X, but we've said, like, hey, we're on a journey, you're on a journey, let's be on this journey together and help achieve some of these things we want to. And so they keep us updated. And then the other very tangible thing we can do is look at your policies, right? Like there are opportunities within your policy to offer more sustainable options. And I've heard of a couple of companies, we don't do this, but I love it. So eventually maybe we will, but I've heard of companies that have actually built into their policy a couple of things. One is different icons around benefits to say like, this is a more sustainable choice. Like if you take the allowance instead of the shipment, or you take this instead of this, right? Like this is more sustainable. I've also heard of some programs that have a core flex actually making the more sustainable options, even though they don't necessarily cost less, making them cost less. So if you choose a more sustainable option, you can actually get a more robust program because they're trying to drive the right behavior. So again, just an opportunity to something tangible
So
that you
good.
can do.
Yeah. And I think it's, again, so many gems. You're really laying it out for everyone out there. But education, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So speak to people internally, educate yourself. We'll put a link to the SDGs in the show notes for anyone that isn't familiar with them. And then tangibly there, you mentioned that, looking at your policies, it's quite easy to be fatalistic in mobility, right? And say, oh, well, they're moving. So yeah, they're probably going to fly. They're probably going to take some stuff or, buy some stuff or whatever. And it obviously is. But that doesn't mean you can't improve. And as you say, incentivizing the right behavior is a big part of that. So I love that idea of sort of weighting benefits towards more sustainable options, allowing people to sort of interchange benefits for more sustainable options. Like people react to incentives, but then it's like,
An educated consumer. Yeah, it's just like, and also like if I as an individual want to make more sustainable choices, knowing what those more sustainable choices are, I'm also able to do that. But today, I would say in our policy too, like you can't necessarily tell, like, is this, if that's something that's important personally to me, like how would I make the right choice? And so again, some not super easy, but kind of easy, but at least tangible things that you could do.
Yes, exactly. And don't need to cost an arm and a leg or completely revitalize things. You can look back at the end of the year and say, hey, yeah, we move forwards, which is the starting place. Let's wrap up with a completely different one, Tanya. You've been giving us all of this knowledge essentially about how to crush life as a global mobility leader, which is great. Now we're putting you onto the other foot. You're going on assignment somewhere and you can choose to go anywhere in the world on assignment for a year. Where are you going to go? And yeah, where are you going to go?
Oh my goodness. So this is such a great question. And I didn't know you were going to ask this ahead of time, but maybe I should have, Paul. So I
ambush you there.
No. This is really good because then I can be really honest. So I would love to. So I've spent a lot of time. My husband, many people know, is Italian. We travel to Europe a lot. So I've been to Italy, but obviously other places in Europe. I've also spent quite a bit of time traveling to Asia, but I have never been to South America. And I have a bit of an adventurous spirit. So I don't know that I could pick a specific country, but I feel like if I was going to be set somewhere, like I'd like to go somewhere new, and I'd like to go to somewhere in South America. And there's so many great places. So yeah, I know that hopefully there'll be some people from Latam listening, like some suggestions. Exactly. That is on our list of places to go. Because again, I've seen quite a bit of Asia. Yeah. I had an assignment in Japan. Japan is a wonderful country. I love it.
I'm so jealous of that.
Europe, but I haven't been to South America. And from my friends in Australia, I've told them I'm terrified of spiders and creepy crawly things. And I was like, I'm sure Australia is lovely, but between the snakes, spiders, giant insects, like
yes, it's too much. Yeah, that's sorry to our fans in Australia.
Sorry to everybody in Australia. It's not on my list.
I love that though. You've chosen a continent. I love that you go on assignment there and you can travel around, explore it, get all the amazing hiking. And a very, very good answer. And hopefully someone can point you in the right direction of where is amazing to go on assignment and how to make it magical. But I agree that would be a lot of fun. Getting to spend some time and just travel around and explore. And we'll have to do another episode here about all your wonderful assignments that we didn't even get stuck into today, but we'll save that for next time. Thank you so much for coming on, Tanya. It's been so great, and I'm sure everyone's going to really appreciate all of the pearls of wisdom you've been dropping today. Good job by you. Thank you very much, and speak to you very soon.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks again for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, Tanya.
Cheers.